Well, good afternoon and good morning, and maybe good evening from wherever you're joining us. My name is Rep Buttle. I am proud to be the co-executive director of the Small Business Roundtable. Today, we are really fortunate to be able to host a conversation with so many important leaders from across the small business spectrum. First, I just want to thank all of our member organizations who each of the CEOs today and their leadership have made time in this very uncertain time to carve an hour out of their days to share their perspectives on leadership and what is going on in Washington. For those of you who weren't in the green room before this, I just continue to be inspired by all of our leaders who are taking a tremendous moment here to step up and really make sure that our nation's small businesses, the backbone of our economy, pull through this. I want to take the opportunity to welcome everyone and go over some housekeeping items. First, I want to let everyone know that this conversation today is being recorded. We had a outsized demand, and so we actually are not going to be able to accommodate everyone. And so we are recording today to make sure it's available for playback to everyone. So just note that anything you might say today will be available for future archive. Second is we're going to be taking questions via the chat box. If you look down in the right hand corner, you'll see a question box. I will be, myself and John, my co-executive director, will be taking questions through the chat box. So feel free to put those in, and we're going to have lots of speakers today. I also want to take a moment, if we could go to the next slide. We're so proud of our 9 organizations, but also in this case, we are thrilled to bring in a new set of organizations who wanted to be a part of this conversation. So special thanks to AEO, the Association of Women's Business Centers, the Connected Commerce Council, Women Impacting Public Policy, National Association of Workforce Boards, and IFA for also sending this out to your members and really showing that the small business community is standing together in this incredibly difficult moment. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn the conversation over to John Stanford, who will introduce our special guest from the Small Business Administration. Before I do that real quick, I promise I wanted to go through the agenda. So let me just tell you actually what we're going to cover today, John, before I turn it over to you. So first, we'll do a series of introductions as we've done. We're going to hear from the Small Business Administration. Then we're going to go to perspectives in the field. So we're going to hear from some of our CEO members about what they're hearing from their members and resources they put together. We're going to quickly turn to an update from the Hill, and we have a special guest for you. And then also we're going to hear from more of our CEOs about the legislative landscape. As some of you may have saw, we just heard that the House of Representatives passed the CARE Act. It's heading to the president for signature. Of course, we expect that he's going to sign it, but we don't know that's the case until he does so. And then we will continue our Q&A throughout the session. So with that, again, thank you so much for joining us. John, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rhett, and thank you to the thousands of small businesses that have joined us here today. It's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to someone who is truly at the forefront of this conversation. As you all know, Congress has put through a number of proposals and ideas about how to best respond to this crisis, but it will be the Small Business Administration who we have here with us today who will be in charge of implementing so many pieces of that. I want to stress that as it stands right now, the Small Business Administration is only speaking to what is in law now. And I think many of us have followed closely some much needed proposals on Capitol Hill, but Bill and his leadership at SBA will be speaking to what SBA is relying on now, and that's the current law that's in place. But I'm pleased to introduce Bill Briggs. He is the Deputy Associate Administrator in the Office of Capital Access. That office will be integral, along with folks at the White House and Department of Treasury and across the government, for ensuring that small businesses have the support they need. I'm pleased to say that Bill has been a great friend in these pretty challenging times to Small Business Roundtable. And I know that he has a lot on his plate as they work with all sorts of stakeholders to move all the programs across their lending portfolio forward. So with that, Bill, pleased to turn it over to you.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Rhett, and thank everybody for joining us today on this Friday. I know it's been hectic times, and the Small Business Roundtable and their leadership of the CEOs, not just the immediate leadership, but all of them have been instrumental in helping SBA and forming SBA throughout this process. I know that earlier it may have been billed as the administrator, SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza would be joining us, and I'm sending her regrets on her behalf. As you're aware, President Trump has committed to helping small businesses during this emergency, and our administrators at the White House today. And we expect to see another demonstration of the administration's commitment to help small businesses later today, so my remarks will be brief. Listen, we get it. I have been, and John and Rhett can verify this, on dozens of phone calls with organizations and small businesses across the country, and we know the impact that folks are feeling, and we understand the concern, particularly with capital access and related issues about what the small businesses are facing in this national emergency. And Congress with the administration are working on legislation, and obviously it looks like the House has passed legislation, and a significant portion of that bill will be going towards helping small businesses. As just a quick background on myself, I have worked at the Small Business Administration now for 2.5 years in the Office of Capital Access, and that goal of that organization and that office is to directly help small businesses access capital that they would not otherwise be able to do so. And when I first started here, I worked with Administrator Linda McMahon, and one of the challenges was how can we get the Small Business Administration, it's one of the best kept secrets in the federal government, how do we amplify our message and get it out there? Well, unfortunately, I think we've solved that problem. I think many people now are aware of the Small Business Administration, and we will be a part of this going forward as we address this national emergency. As John kind of intimated, I will focus my remarks today on what SBA has already done, and how small businesses on this phone and this conference can take immediate action to help their businesses and their employees. We've taken some pretty unprecedented steps in the last 10 days, and I want to make sure that you folks are aware of that. The first thing, and this is not business advice, I need to qualify my remarks in that, and this is intended for members of these organizations and not for the media, but I do want to say generally, one of the first things that we did was remind SBA lenders of their current authority to defer loans. So if you have an SBA guaranteed loan before this situation hit, that your lender has the ability to defer those loans for up a certain amount of time, depending on the type of loan it is. So of course, talk to your SBA lender immediately about doing that if you have an SBA guaranteed loan. The second piece of good news and the second action that the administrator took was to defer payments on all disaster loans. So all previous disaster loans, the payments are deferred for the end of this calendar year. So if you were, in an area that was hit by a tornado or hurricane, fire, flood, or something, and you received a SBA disaster loan, your payments are deferred for the rest of the year. Wanted to flag that as well. That's an important action that should help people who have already, unfortunately, been impacted by disaster. I also want to talk about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, where we're calling it the EIDL loan. I think this is one of the centerpieces of our response so far in this national emergency. And on March 6th, the President signed the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act, which had two major impacts for SBA. One, it increased our lending authority for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program to over $7 billion. So that was money that right away, as of March 6th, we had the authority to get out to impacted small businesses. And it's hard to remember almost 3 weeks ago, but small businesses were being impacted at that time. It also gave the authority for SBA the authority to declare coronavirus as a disaster, which is the first time in our agency's history that we have the authority to declare a virus a pandemic event. And that's just, again, how unique this situation is that we are all facing. After receiving the new authority to declare COVID-19 an economic disaster, SBA Administrator Jovita Carranza exercised her own authority to reduce the requirements on governors when requesting individual state territory declaration for economic injury disaster loan assistance. Because of her decisive action, SBA was able to declare all 50 states, 5 territories, and the District of Columbia and begin offering disaster loan for working capital. So again, this is the economic injury disaster loan, as we're calling it, the EIDL loan, and this is something that is currently available to any small business impacted in the 50 states, 5 territories, and the District of Columbia. They are eligible to apply. The details about the economic injury disaster loan, I'm going to give you a very brief summary. Up to $2 million for working capital needs. And I want to be clear on this, that if you are in a situation where SBA decides to grant you a certain amount, and then I'm using this example as $100,000, and given the nature of this thing, you decide in 2 weeks you need more capital, you're able to come back and modify that loan request, and it can go all the way up to $2 million. So it's not a one-time thing with the EIDL loan. You have the ability to go back and seek additional capital over time as this thing progresses. The terms on these loans go out for as much as 30 years. The interest rates are 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for private nonprofit organizations. This also is a key thing. Normally in the 7A loan program that I work in, and I want to be very careful I qualify this, before the emergency, nonprofits were now eligible for financial assistance. Under the EIDL loan program, nonprofits have always been eligible. So that is a key thing. And again, this will change too as we see it in the coming days as well. But I want to clarify, just for EIDL loans, for economic injury disaster loans, nonprofits are eligible right now to apply. And right now, the payments are deferred for a full year from the date of the promissory note. So again, we recognize we're not issuing these disaster loans and expecting people to make payments right away. One thing I also want to note for everybody on the call, and this is exceptionally important for all small businesses in this national emergency, is that there are a lot of people who understand that small businesses might be looking for capital, and they might be tracking deceptive advertising or something like that. There is never a cost to apply for an SBA economic injury disaster loan. It is free, and you're able to do that on our website at sbadisaster.com, sba.gov/disaster. Again, sba.gov/disaster for the economic injury disaster loan. You do not need to pay anyone. Our services are free in that regard. You should be careful. You should always go to sba.gov to confirm your resources. In this emergency, we are not charging people to apply. Finally, I just want to remind you that the administrator took action to defer existing home and business disaster loans. I already have mentioned that. And so that's something, again, too, that if you already have a previous disaster loan from another thing, your payments are deferred through the calendar year. And again, sba.gov/disaster for the economic injury disaster loan. This is something you can take today. So finally, the third bullet point. So I've talked about loan deferments and those options and talking to your SBA lender to get a loan deferment. I've talked to you about the economic injury disaster loan, and I'm going to remind you of the non-financial assistance that you can get from SBA resource partners and our district offices throughout the country. I work in headquarters. We have 68 district offices across the country, and our resource partners, including SCORE, the small business development centers and all of that, are able to assist and provide often free counseling to small businesses who are looking to grow, start, and expand or recover from their situations. And so those are an invaluable resource as we address this national emergency, and I encourage everyone to make themselves available as much as possible. Finally, I just want to say I recognize there's tremendous interest in the legislation that Congress apparently just passed. And I know that the Small Business Roundtable and its partners have kept SBA informed every step of the way. At this time, SBA is working with Treasury to provide all of our stakeholders and lending partners accurate information once the legislation officially becomes law. SBA and Treasury are committed to providing our stakeholders with timely guidance to the lending community who will be on the front lines of protecting small businesses and their employees at this time. I know there might be a few questions right now, so I'll take them.
Thank you, Bill, for that incredible overview. A lot of information, and I know folks will probably replay this recording a few times to digest it all. Seeing a handful of questions come through the chat box, and everyone is welcome to send in questions throughout the call. But the first question, I think it's a really important one, is can you just, for all this information that's going to be coming out, the great stuff you've just been saying, what's the best way to follow all this changing information? We know you have a lot of work to do about the new legislation. There are the existing programs. What are some of the SBA channels to watch for, and how can folks follow knowing that they're getting reliable information?
Great, John. I appreciate that. And accurate information is really important right now. There's the potential to be a lot of misinformation out there right now and also in the coming weeks. And so SBA.gov and all of our social media channels will have accurate information for small businesses, as will our district offices. And so you can find the information there. Finally, I would also include Treasury, Treasury.gov and WhiteHouse.gov. There'll be more information in the coming days about how small businesses. Generally, the rule of thumb is if you're not sure, please consult a .gov website to find the most accurate information, as opposed to that. A .gov information will be your best resource in the coming days, as well as all the applicable social media channels that represent those .gov organizations.
Thanks, Bill. And seeing lots of questions coming in about the new loan program. And as we said, there'll be some conversation of that later in the webinar. We will get to your questions on those. But Bill, being an official of the administration, is only limited to talking about what is already in law, and we are a little one signature away, and I think that'll be changing, and we'll be getting Bill more information. But one of the questions we had come through was about resource partners. Bill, could you just touch on, if folks want to connect with someone locally, are there resource partners that can be helpful in this time?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find this information about local SBA district offices and potential resource partners is sba.gov/local-assistance. So sba.gov/local.assistance. And then if you plug in your zip code, you'll be able to find the nearest SBA offices and/or resource partners who will be able to provide assistance as well. So the sba.gov/local-assistance, that's how you find an SBA resource near you.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for taking a few questions. I know we'll be getting to a number of folks' other questions, but I also know that you have an important job to return to as the administration prepares to roll out a continuation of possible programs. I think some huge takeaways, very helpful on the specific programs, but also more to come, and to be watching out for the SBA.gov information updates. So with that, we'll conclude the first portion of this webinar, and thank Bill and the whole team at SBA for the incredible work they're doing. Thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Thank you, everybody. And we wish the best for everybody and all the small businesses out there, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, John. This is Rhett. I think we wanted to move to the next portion of our conversation. We are going to talk a little bit about the legislation that was passed by the House today, but we're going to do that as bucket three of this conversation. I think what we really wanted to do today was, there are obviously an onset of amazing government resources, but we're so thrilled to be able to have an amazing host of national organizations, and today we're really just going to hear from 4 of them and some more during the legislative part, but who are working to make sure that we're getting resources into the hands of small business owners, but also that we're hearing directly from you. And you could just have no better voice than the faces that are on your screen today. And so I just wanted to open a conversation with some of our CEOs today about what are they hearing from their members? What are they doing to respond to their members? And are there resources that are out there? So Shiling, I wanted to start with you because I know that in particular, the Asian American community has been particularly hit hard by the virus. And so I thought maybe could we just open up and hear a little bit about how you're hearing things from the field and how National ACE is responding. And then after Shiling, Ramiro will turn to you. So Shiling.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, my name is Shiling Tong, the President and CEO of National ACE, Asian Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. We represent the voice of the AAPI business, about 2.2 million AAPI business. And many of the AAPI business having to shut down and lay off workers. For example, one of our next-gen leader, Andrew Chow, he is the co-founder of Boba Guys, and he closed down about 17 stores and laid off 400 workers. And we heard many, many sad stories, and then they just cannot survive their business. Anti-Asian segment have been lead to low turnout in Asian restaurants even before the shutdown in many states. For that reason, I'm so grateful, and I think it is critical that President Trump praised Asian Americans and at a press event and reminded all Americans that we are blameless as just as victims as all Americans. And right now, we are focusing on providing input and policy recommendations to the disaster recovery and the support packages. We are thinking to have a one-stop center for AAPI business and putting up online seminars and to focus on economic injury disaster loans. I think that for SBA loan is very critical, and I think probably it's an overwhelmed response. Their technical issue probably need to be watched very carefully because some of our owners, they have to be online for so long in order to get the application. Right now, for all the small business that are dying for money, this is one of the most important issues for them.
Thank you so much, Shiling. That was super helpful for perspective. Ramiro, can we turn to you before we turn to Ron after you to hear what you're hearing from the Hispanic and Latino community and business owners across the country?
Thank you so much, Rhett. Thank you, Rhett and John, for leading us with the Small Business Roundtable. It is our honor to be a member of this roundtable. Thank you for being true partners and always doing a lot of the blocking and tackling and the heavy lifting for all of us. So I just wanted to commend you both for organizing this call. I will be brief. The Latino business community is composed of 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses, 30 million Latinos in America, 60 million Latinos in America, 1 out of every 6 people. We also have, out of the 30 million small businesses that you all heard the Small Business Administration is working with through Jovita Carranza and his leadership, of those businesses, those 30 million small businesses, right now, many of them are below $1 million in sales. They're young, they're fragile, and these companies compose $21 trillion economic impact for our nation. The largest economy in the world is the American economy, as you all know, and the majority of the economic generation comes from our businesses, most of them diverse, most of them small, and many of them young. And I wanted to share that when this coronavirus crisis began, that this brought us all to the forward of doing our best. And these businesses have about 27 days of working capital, and we have 260 Hispanic chambers around the country, and the economic impact alone of Latino-owned businesses is over $2 trillion of the $21 trillion American economy. So for us, our focus has been, John and Rhett and everyone, is we need to save small business in America. And as you all know, the recession from 12 years ago was extremely difficult, but the small businesses were not directly assisted. Bill is correct. The SBA is now front and center in providing relief and support. And the bill that we hope will be signed today has an important piece to it. The $377 billion small business rescue plan. Our focus is that we need to get the loans into the hands of small businesses to help keep our workforce employed, to cover rent, mortgage, utilities, and other expenses. They need to go to their bankers and get these loans very quickly. These loans are hopefully going to be 100%. I know they're going to be 100% federally backed. They don't need collateral, and we don't have the luxury of time. So on behalf of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and our board of directors, it's an honor to be a resource with each of you. We're here to collaborate, to be true partners, as you have been, John and Rhett. And we believe that at this time, as a nation, we should be nonpartisan. We're not red, we're not blue, we're red, white, and blue. And right now is the time to put the color green back into the economy once we recover. So I just wanted to say on behalf of our members, we're very excited about the act that will be signed today, that the Congress has approved and the Senate has already approved. For us, it's important to allow these loans that I forgot to mention are also forgivable if the dollars that are loaned can convert to grants, if the dollars are used to keep our people employed and keep our businesses surviving. So thanks to each of you, and we stand to continue to be a resource for you on behalf of our small business community, which is really the future of our economic development efforts.
Thank you so much, Ramiro. And I think Ramiro is the newest of all of our CEOs. And so we've just been, your leadership is and energy is brought a lot to us in this moment. And thanks for deciding to take on the national leadership mantle here during this critical moment. With that, I want to turn over to someone who many of you are familiar with, Ron Busby, who's the president and CEO of the Black Chamber.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Ron Busby, president of the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc. Proud to represent our 145 chambers across the 42 states that represent over 300,000 Black-owned businesses. Celebrating our 11th year last month, where we have been based on our 5 pillars: advocacy, which has been critical in this conversation. Access to capital will be more critical in the future weeks. Contracting opportunities, which we'll speak a little bit about this afternoon. Entrepreneurial training, which will be extremely important in our businesses getting the capital that they need. The government has done its part. Your leaders of chambers have done their part to make sure that our voices were heard. Now it's really our responsibility collectively to make sure that our business members have the knowledge, the resources, and the understanding that they're going to need to get the funding that they desperately need. I want to say a couple of things. One, although you've heard from the Asian Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, and now the U.S. Black Chamber, nowhere in this legislation have you heard the words Black, Hispanic, or Asian. You have heard the word small. It is extremely important because this is a piece of legislation that is here for our business communities. But for those folk that are on the call that are members of the U.S. Black Chamber, understand and know this, your voice was heard at the table. And understand that we were here to make sure that our businesses, as well as the concerns and challenges that they had, are being addressed. You've heard about most of the issues and opportunities for our businesses. Where we kind of got involved in the legislation from our government contractor standpoint was to ensure that those folk and businesses that are doing business with the government were not going to be penalized for their inability to be able to get the products and or services during this difficult time. We did not want them to suffer, be penalized, or perhaps even their contracts terminated because of issues outside of their control. And on the opposite side of that conversation for government contractors, we understand that this is about cash flow. And so a loan is great, but if I have an invoice out to you as a government agency and I don't get paid for 120 days or so, I can still end up going out of business. And so we were fortunate enough and successful at getting the prompt pay back into this piece of legislation. It was a bill that was instituted under the previous administration, where if you invoice on the 1st of the month, you could actually get paid on the 15th of the month. And so things like that were extremely important for us to make sure that our government contractors heard. But we also represent many of us small business owners. And so for the mid and small size business, there was a concern about employees versus contractors. Many of our businesses, both on the technical side, our 501c3s, as well as many of our small businesses, don't necessarily incur the full cost of an employee, but they do have a lot of subcontractors and 1099s. And we were there to fight to make sure that that expense was also going to be written off in the loan and or grant. Some of the other things, high level, no personal guarantees, that this was in fact a grant versus a loan. My members were not interested in loans. We wanted to make sure that there was easy access to the information, that there's less amount of paperwork as possible. And for our chamber presidents and nonprofits around the country, we wanted to make sure that our 501c3s were included in this. And lastly, for members that are interested in hearing more about Black issues, the U.S. Black Chamber is going to have our own conference call next Thursday at 2 p.m. So you can go to our website and find out all the information there. We'll talk about specific needs, challenges for Black-owned businesses, and we'll be rolling out our web series on how to get access to the loans, actually stepping you through, directing you to the SBA lenders to make the process that much easier. You can go to my website at www.usblackchambers.org. Again, www.usblackchambers.org to find out more information. Stay tuned for the details, and we look forward to continuing to have your information part of our conversation as we move forward together. Thank you.
Ron, it sounds like you're running for president. You know how to throw that website out there. Should we expect an announcement anytime soon?
No time soon, but good leadership is always needed.
All right, thanks.
I'll be your vice president, Ron. I'll be your vice president.
And then we will.
That would be a great ticket.
That would be an amazing ticket. I think just so everyone on the call knows, we will make sure to wrap up all these resources, including information to Ron's call next week. USHCC had a call earlier this week, so we'll make sure to get the link out to that. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn the line over to Jen Earl, who's the CEO of the National Association of Women Business Owners. Jen.
Thank you so much, Rhett, John, the SBR, all of you guys that are supporting our U.S. small businesses. NABO represents the voice of 10 million women business owners. And at the start of this crisis, which seems like so long ago, but just a few weeks ago, we asked our members to continue to share what they were experiencing so that we could stay informed and we could know what we needed to do to help. And one of the comments that we got back was that this is much tougher than a typical recession because the businesses came to a complete halt compared to the gradual slowness over time. So they're really suffering. And I just wanted to share a few stories from some different industries. One of our members is in the events and trade show industry. She had to refund over $65,000 in just 3 business days. In the staffing industry, since Tuesday, March 17th, they've had to lay off over a third of their employees across 2 staffing companies. They anticipate at least another 60 to 80 employees in the next few weeks or 2, which will bring them over 50% of the contract employees. In the marketing design industry already, they asked each of their 35 employees to take 5 unpaid days off in April. The sick leave and FMLA acts have added additional burdens to some of our small businesses. Small businesses have to bear the brunt of the expense in lieu of a tax credit or refund at some point in the future, which doesn't help them with the financial burden that they're carrying right now. The home and healthcare industry laid off 3 people this week and reduced the hours of her staff. Some have been with her for over 12 years. And some of the areas of support that they are having some issues with is it is taking days to fill out the simple form of the disaster loan assistance. The site is always temporarily unavailable or they're getting kicked out, so they're having a lot of trouble with that. And then others aren't clear about how the SBA loans work and feel like the chances of getting it are really small. So that's just some of the comments that we've been hearing. We'll continue to save those stories and share them as they come. And the resources that are available for NABO, we've added a number of different kinds of virtual experiences. One, we do weekly virtual programming focusing on business support and making sure that our business owners have all of the necessary information and understand clearly what's happening. And we're doing webinars on personal and professional well-being to help with the psychological toll of all of this. And we're also doing virtual activity where our members can get together on Zoom calls, do have scheduled meetups for them to share their stories and provide support for one another. And we've also opened up our programming to not just members, so it's available to all the women business owners across the country. You just want to make sure that they know that they have a place to come. And we're storing all of this in a booth in Institute of Entrepreneurial Development. It's like a virtual booth. And in there, we're keeping all of our resources, recorded webinars, information from all of our partners who are so gracious to offer support. It's accessible through the nabo.org website, and anybody can go in there and get access to all of that. So you just click on the Institute, and then there's a little button there to get you through. And we're also doing what we can to help with our chapters. We have over 50 chapters across the country, and the nonprofit industry is also taking a huge hit. So we're trying to help our chapters stay vibrant, and we're anxiously hoping that there'll be relief in the future for our membership organizations, the 501c6s, so that we can continue with the work that we're doing in supporting the nation's fastest growing segment of the US economy. So that's what I got. We've got stories that are continually coming on a daily basis, and we can continue to share them. And we're really grateful for the opportunity, you guys, to share what our members are experiencing and what we can do to help.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jen. I know that we have a ton of folks on the call here who are working on legislation, policy ideas, philanthropy ideas, and I think the real stories of what business owners are going through are so critically important for that.
Pleased to welcome Karen Kerrigan, President and CEO of Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, Katie Wannenberg, Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs at the National Association for the Self-Employed, as well as Keith Hall, the President and CEO of the National Association for the Self-Employed. Sorry to not have your picture, Keith. And of course, Todd McCracken, President and CEO of the National Small Business Association. I'll open it up, maybe start with you, Todd. Any immediate feedback on how this package may be relevant to your membership?
Well, we've been big advocates for this for a long time. And by the way, thank you, John and Rhett, for putting this together. And thanks, Kevin, for that comprehensive overview. But we think this is exactly what small businesses need. I think for us now, I mean, it's going to get cash in their hands, and there's no repayment of most of it. It is essentially a grant for small companies, the centerpiece of it here, the Paycheck Protection Act. The job for all of us now is to get the word out to those of you on the line now, but also all small businesses, because I keep encountering people who just can't quite believe this. We lead with it's a loan program, and they assume that's what it is. And the word that this really is essentially a grant program, that if almost all the loan will be forgiven if you continue to pay your employees, people, that hasn't filtered through yet. And we really have a big communication lift here, because if people don't take advantage of this, they won't get, our economy won't turn around nearly as fast as it will otherwise, because this is a big lifeline in the near term for companies that are struggling to keep their doors open.
Karen, do you feel similarly for your membership? Todd, I think his characterization, getting the word out about this being a grant is going to be so critical. How do you think this package, what does it mean for SBE Council's membership?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you to the Small Business Roundtable and all the presenters, and for Kevin. I think she did a fantastic job of providing that overview. Yeah, I mean, what we've been hearing really, capital. I mean, many of our members are doing what they can right now to survive and to keep their doors open. But given the shock, of the crisis, and going into the year where they were feeling pretty confident and they were expanding and growing and hiring employees, and then just to have this shock and the subsequent plunge in capital. And we don't know how long that's going to be, given, the orders and the shutdown and the lack of traffic and public mobility and people not coming to their stores and things like that. So capital and cash, indeed. And I will add that, on our website, SBE Council, we do drill down on these legislative provisions and visit what it's called What's in the CARES Act for small businesses, self-employed and gig economy workers. And that's the other good piece of this. It's for a whole array of small business owners, self-employed, gig economy people. There's all different types of programs. You know, unemployment insurance will be available for, you know, gig economy workers, but there's also loans available for them as well. Loans. Now, should I call it loans? They're calling it loans, Todd. So I'll stick with the I'll stick with the language that the SBA is calling them. Two things really quickly. Bill mentioned something I think that's very, very important in terms of, you know, just being really, really careful in terms of who you listen to, and some things out there may not be true. Even while this webinar was going on, I was on Twitter right when the House, you know, after the House passed the bill, and there was a tweet by a so-called expert that said, small business owners, you have to hire back people right away in order to qualify for the relief in the Paycheck Protection Program. But we know you don't have to do this stuff right away. There's flexibility in the program to allow businesses to hire new or returning employees by June 30th, you know, for that 8-week window. And this is the Q&A that I've been reading, you know, from the committees. So I would say don't do anything rash based upon this expert advice, that you might always check reliable sources, you know, sourced from the SBA, or go to our groups where we have this stuff posted, you know, on our website. The other piece that I add really quickly is, you know, the tax relief provisions that were provided by the CARES Act. There's been a delay of payment of the employer side payroll taxes for small businesses, and this is huge. You know, as a small business owner, how burdensome, you know, those payroll taxes are. So tax payments may be delayed until January 1, 2021, with 50% owed on December 31st, 2021, and the other half owed on December 31st, 2022. So this is very generous, and I think it's really going to help small businesses retain their capital. We, as I said, on our website, we have some of these other tax relief provisions, the 5-year carryback and expansion of net operating losses earned in 2018, 2019, 2020, the loosening of the business interest deduction from 30% of EBITDA up to 50%, you know, waiving the 10% early withdrawal penalty on retirement accounts, so changes to health savings accounts. So there's other things beyond the loan grant program that you can look at from a tax perspective, including another tax credit, which is the employee retention credit. That's another piece of this as well, that, you know, 50% tax credit that you'll be able to use, I think it's almost the whole year until December 31st of this year. So SBEcouncil.org, I think a lot of this is really going to be very, very helpful for small businesses. And we appreciate you, John and Rhett, and all of our fellow members at the SBR, you know, for helping us to get the word out and really helping on advocacy to make this happen.
Thanks so much, Karen. I want to turn to Keith and Katie at the National Association for the Self-Employed. A key question with any policy thing is, does this apply for the self-employed? And I know you all really led so much advocacy on this front. So I'll turn it over to you with the big question. Can self-employed companies find relief here?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone, for being on the call. And of course, Keith can jump in here. But I just want to take one moment to just acknowledge that this is a very challenging and scary time for so many small businesses who are, I think as it was articulated at the top of the call, you know, this is unlike any other crisis because, you know, our businesses have stopped. And, you know, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And so I want to acknowledge that I think you're seeing on this webinar a huge collection of people who not only advocate every day for all small businesses, but truly care about how we come out of this stronger and better. So I want to start with that. The one positive thing I can say, if we're trying to be a glasses half kind of full girl, is that for the first time in my 8 years of advocating for the self-employed in the business community, that the language passed by the House and Senate and hopefully signed by the President is inclusive of the self-employed and independent contractor community. This is a huge victory. As the NASC has always said, a business of one is still a business. And so they need to be protected and they need to have access to the tools and resources that other businesses have. So we are thrilled, and to Kevin's comments, the great leadership by a bipartisan group of senators in the Senate have advocated for us, and we know that our House small business champions have equally always understood the importance of the self-employed. So to that point, the self-employed and independent contractors are eligible. There is still some remaining questions, as we were just discussing the loans that can be converted into grants, as to how the self-employed navigate that, but we look forward to dialoguing directly with the Small Business Administration and other stakeholders as to how we can seek clarity around that, so that the self-employed can access those programs and understand the recourse that they have in ensuring that those current loans then can be converted into grants. And so this is pretty exciting. The other important thing about this that we haven't talked about is the unemployment insurance provisions in the bill are also inclusive of the self-employed and independent contractors, and that is a huge win if you are unfortunately in the position where you are not able to sustain your business. You do have access to unemployment benefits, which is really strong. I think that there has been some thoughts about what is kind of the next phase. I don't want to speak for anyone on our call, but I do think that we anticipate that there will be a fourth, a fifth, and potentially a sixth relief measures that are going to be passed to ensure that our economy and our small businesses are able to recover through this tragic situation. And so I would anticipate that as we move forward, being able to share your story, advocate for yourself directly with your elected officials will be crucial in ensuring that subsequent legislation is inclusive of what you're experiencing as a small business owner. I think again that we're all in this together. I know it's been a hokey slogan, and I've also heard we're all in this together as long as we're 6 feet apart. But you do have a strong network of small business advocates, self-employed advocates, independent contractor advocates that are working tirelessly to make sure that whatever we can do, and I know for many of you, it may not be enough or may not come quick enough, but we are trying our best to expedite all this process. I'm not sure if it was mentioned by Kevin or Bill, but by law, the SBA will have to implement these programs within 15 days. So when the president signs this bill into law, hopefully today, the clock starts. And so again, I know 15 days can sound like a lifetime, but we're working as hard as we can. And my understanding is loans that are approved for less than $10,000 will need to be executed within 3 business days. So there are some provisions where we understand that timing is everything, and trying to save your business, to keep your employees employed, to feel as though that our big government can actually step in and help you. I think the one other thing that we haven't touched on, because this is really about the CARES Act, but recognizing that there are so many resources available in the states that you reside in. And I know there are a lot of resources, and to what Karen said, they need to be reputable resources, but make sure that you're also looking to your state governments for support as you are navigating through this crisis. I think there's quite a few questions coming through, and so I don't know, John, if you want to pivot to some of those, and maybe if Karen and Keith or Todd want to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Katie. A lot of great information for the self-employed there, and really for all businesses. Keep the questions coming in. We'll get through as many as we can. We know we're past the hour, but we're here to help. And I'll just make the note of, this is the importance of small business organizations that you belong to, and leaders are on this call. It's for exactly times like this. So I'll put it out to the group. We have a question we've gotten from several people, but Martha from Portland, are we expecting any additional legislation? I know a couple of you nodded to that, but is everyone in agreement that this is probably not the end?
Yeah, this is Todd. I would say that's certainly the case. And that's why this legislation, even if it has all the right ideas in it, it almost surely has some drafting errors. And as quickly as this is put together, there are some unintended consequences here. And we need to hear from you all about what those are. So if something isn't working, I think Congress is ready to fix it in the next bill. So there's that piece of it. So communicate with us all. You can come to our website at nsba.biz and both to get information, but also to leave comments. But and secondly, this, as much money as this is for these loan programs and grants, is the way they'll actually function, it may not be enough. In fact, it probably won't be enough. And so I think there's a good chance Congress will come back, if for no other reason than to refill the pot, so that this can go on a little bit longer while we see a recovery.
Yeah.
And Brett, this is Keith. And I agree with Todd. I think this is not going to be the last we're going to hear of this. I think there will be some other needs. There will certainly be some response to those needs. And I think it goes without saying that this has been overwhelming for our economy, for small business. There's no doubt about that. But I also think this legislation is also overwhelming. It is dramatic and it's responsive. And I think it's confusing. There's so much information that came out today. The one thing I would communicate to the thousands of small businesses that are listening right now, and even the thousands more that are going to listen to this on a recording, is make sure that you remember that you're not alone in this. If you look at the information, the number of organizations that are on this call, bookmark those websites, bookmark the SBA's website, the things that Bill talked about, the resources that are available even in the local communities through SCORE, the Small Business Development Centers. Each of the organizations that are part of the Small Business Roundtable have extensive websites with FAQs. We are continually sharing information. So if you forget everything else you heard on this webinar, remember that you're not alone, because there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of resources waiting for you to read to help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah. Karen here on just a quick answer to that. I agree, with Todd that there will be some type of likely technical correction bill that sort of cleans up, some of the things, because there are so many moving parts in this legislation. And then I know the speaker talked about today. Look, maybe this was the thing to kickstart, an infrastructure bill. And possibly now we make it some type of big infrastructure bill, which may in fact turn into sort of a jobs bill. But, I think that might be something that will be tackled. And certainly if we're going to start rebuilding our infrastructure, which we needed to do anyway, that's long overdue, that there's going to be a lot of job opportunities and a lot of small business opportunities as well.
Stacy from Maine, as well as Tony from New York, talked about their idle submissions or the website being down. How can they follow up with SBA? I know that SBA needed to get off the phone. I'm happy to jump at these, but if folks have anything they want to say about people who have already filed loan requests or website, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Rhett, hi, how are you? This is Leroy with the United States Hispanic Chamber. Regarding that, I'm getting in-time information right now that the SBA is actually reverting from collecting the information online because I think their system had been crashing quite a bit. So now they're going to require for businesses to download forms, fill them out, and reload them back into the site. They're working on updating the site right now, but it looks like the gear is going to change a little bit. Instead of intaking information via the online portal, it's going to be intaken via form uploading.
Thanks, Leroy. We're seeing that as well. So just to reiterate, you will now be downloading the forms, filling them out, and then re-uploading them. We know the SBA team is working on a new or alternative site. The former site, to Stacy's question, the website was down, but you can now upload documents, as Leroy from the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce said. Do we have any other questions out there or any other thoughts from our speakers on the phone from previous questions?
This is Ron Busby with the U.S. Black Chamber. I just wanted to make an announcement that I know that there's going to be ebb and flows and questions from our members across the country. The U.S. Black Chambers is doing our online training effective April the 6th. So your members, your nonprofits that are 501c3s, they can go online with us. We will walk them through step by step how to apply for the loan. We will send them to an SBA certified lender to simplify the process. For those of you that are interested, again, we'll have our call on Thursday at 2 o'clock, so you'll be able to find out exactly how to load in on that call with us. Thank you.
Thanks. We're having questions coming in. Two of them. One, can the Paycheck Protection Act loans as well as tax deferments be used? I think Katie or Karen, you alluded to there are other elements of benefits for employers in the bill. Can you get a loan as well as defer your payroll taxes and other taxes?
You know what, I believe you can. I think the only thing that you cannot do, is sort of what's called double dipping, using the tax credits for paid leave, and then being able to get that loan forgiven, for that payroll. I hadn't seen anything in the legislation, though, that said that you cannot defer tax payments or payroll taxes and wouldn't qualify, for the loan itself. So, maybe someone else has maybe we have a tax guy on the phone.
May I jump in here? This is Kevin from Senator Cardin's office.
Yeah.
If you're, Karen, you're the expert on this. I'm sorry, I am not a tax expert, but I do have a little bit here that's presented from our office. If we're specifically talking about the employee retention credit for employers, then this is the credit is not available to employers receiving assistance through the Paycheck Protection Program.
Exactly. You can't double. Right. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Okay, then you said that. I just wanted to be clear. I'm sorry. You covered it.
I think you made it more clear by stating the program. Thank you, Kevin.
And may I add one other thing, because I don't want the businesses discouraged. We want them to use these programs and initiatives that are available. And on the Paycheck Protection Program, please know that they have waived the personal guarantee. They have waived credit elsewhere. They really, as Todd said so many times, they really intend for this to be a grant. They really want you to keep your employees. They want you to stay in business. And so we've tried to remove as many hurdles as possible. We've taken away, the risk from the banks to get them to do it. And we've tried to reduce some of the other financial benchmarks you would need to make if you were taking out your everyday loan. Now, the other programs, they largely still remain the typical loan process, but for the paycheck protection loans, it's much more streamlined. And then we also made it more streamlined when you're getting those economic injury disaster loans and emergency grants through the end of the year.
Keith, do you have anything to add from a tax perspective?
Well, I think the logic, and I always hesitate necessarily using the word IRS and logic in the same sentence, but not having the ability to have the payroll protection part forgiven at the same time you're using those same extension payroll dollars for a credit. And just, briefly, a credit means it's a dollar for dollar offset on your taxes. It makes total sense that those shouldn't be combined. And I think Karen mentioned not a double dip. So I think at the end of the day, the intent is clear. and that is to make this program look like a grant as long as the money is used to extend payroll, to keep people working, to protect the workforce. And this is where tax law is supposed to work, in that, you know, the idea is to fulfill the intent. And so I think it makes total sense.
Kevin, maybe, or I'm sorry, Keith, staying with you. Some questions coming in about people as S corps versus the self-employed. We have a few questions. Can S corps be considered small businesses?
Well, that's a sole proprietor, right? I probably have to rely on Karen for that, but I'll just read to you the overlying list of what it takes to be an eligible entity to get these. The business or entity must have been in operation on February 15th, right? You can't have just heard that this is coming, even talk of it a week ago, and have set up a business. You needed to be already operational on February 15th, 2020. The small business concern, as well as certain nonprofits, 501c3, veterans organization, tribal business concerns, and that have fewer than 500 employees, or you can look at your NAICS code, your industry code, and if you have a higher employee count, that can be used rather than the 500. Outside of that, then you have individuals who operate a sole proprietorship, including those with or without employees, an independent contractor, and self-employed individuals. Any business that employs not more than 500 employees per physical location of the business concern and that is assigned a North American Industry Classification Code that begins with 72, which is really the hospitality, the restaurant industry. I heard Xiling say at the beginning that, you know, in her membership, there were restaurants who were feeling this much before anybody else did. And so we want to capture, we know that those industries operate a little bit differently, and so they had a different size standard. And again, you'll need to go and look at these documents and do a little bit more research to figure out if you make it. And so the affiliation rules were waived for small business concern operating as a franchise that's identified as a franchise under SBA, and companies that might have investment money from SBA's as an investment program, which is called the Small Business Investment Company. So I don't know if that's helpful. Some of these things, you know, as I said, you'll need to go look at the size standards and do a little bit more digging.
And to that point, Kevin, I don't know how many business owners are familiar with size standards at SBA.
Sorry.
But you find them Googling at SBA size standards. It's a chart that then goes industry by industry. If you are above 500 employees, but maybe you're 700 or 800, I strongly encourage looking at that chart, because there are many industries, particularly in the manufacturing, telecommunications, even the candy making space, that it's actually the threshold is much higher than 500 employees, might be more like 1,000 or 1,250. So if you're worried you're not going to be eligible because you're above 500, do double check the SBA size standards like Kevin described there. There was a question, and Kevin, I'm not sure if you spoke to it, but we have a lot of franchisees on the phone. And so I just want to reiterate the eligibility of franchisees, if you'd like to touch on that.
Well, as I said, franchisees are eligible, and the affiliations rules are waived for those that are already identified on SBA's website. So in that case, the franchises should go onto SBA's website and look at what the regulations say right now. So it's not a definitive answer that everybody, they need to look at that list.
Thank you so much. We see questions continuing to come in, but a lot of them are variations on similar themes about when and how. And so I want to just kind of summarize what our speakers have said, and that the president is expected to sign this, and who knows, he may have signed it while we were on the phone now. SBA is expected to get these programs operational within 15 days. That's what's in the legislation. As you heard from Bill at the top of the call, SBA is going to work as fast and as hard as they can with other government agencies. Rhett, I'm going to turn this over to you as we close out and come to the end of this important webinar.
John, this is Kevin with Senator Cardin's office. May I jump in here? I want to lower expectations. I don't think that 15 days applies to all the programs because the Paycheck Protection Program will take longer. The other ones, I think that they were talking about getting out regulations that they're trying to, but I don't think that that will be up and running within 15 days. Nevertheless, everyone knows that speed is a priority, and I think the main thing is tell your lend, if you have a loan, whether it's SBA or not, they should be giving you a deferral. They absolutely should, and if they're giving you a hard time or they're telling you that they have to look into it, you should definitely go to the SBA, your district office immediately, and try to have them intervene on your behalf, because these other different initiatives should be available to you, and we intend for it also not to put stress on the banks. We realize that this is a domino effect. So I just want to be realistic on that. This is a complicated program that Senator Rubio and his staff worked out with Treasury, and we want them to do it right.
And thanks to everyone for joining today. An hour and a half flew by. Normally we only do webinars for an hour, but we know there's so much hunger for information. And I just want to mention that the Senate Small Business Committee, Kevin just shared a link, went live with a guide for small business owners to the legislation. We'll be getting that out as well to everyone who joined the call today. I really want to encourage everyone, please lean on the organizations you heard from today. This is why they exist. They need your support now more than ever. They're fighting for you in Washington and in states across the country. None of this would have been possible today without them. And so I just want to thank each of them for their leadership. If you need anything from us as a point of contact, you can email us at team@smallbusinessroundtable. We can get you connected with anyone who spoke on the webinar today or help you get access to these tools. I also just want to note, as we said before, we reached capacity for this, which is really impressive. We had over 8,000 people register. So very shortly after this, we'll get the recording live, and everyone who's on today will get a copy of the recording. If you know someone who should see it, share the recording. And we will be in conversation about other webinars going forward or events to make sure that we're doing our part, since you all are doing your part, to keep our economy strong. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and this is now the end of the webinar.